welcome everyone to this forum. We've got quite a lot that we're going to do today. We're going to look at our work at schools. We're going to look at climate justice and what we're trying to do in one part of Enfield. And we're going to finally look at the importance of linking what we do locally into a global context. And we have a colleague here from Turkey, and Fika will be on soon from Canada, who will be talking about that. But we're going to start by talking about our work with schools. Um, some time ago, University College London contacted us and said if we would we be interested in working with them and developing some work with schools, which entailed helping those schools to develop climate action plans. And every school is supposed to have a climate action plan by the end of the year, and most of them don't. But University College London, we've got Lachlan Atack here with us. I hope I pronounced your second name right. It's the first time I've done it. We've got Lachlan with us, who's from University College London, and we've been talking to him about doing that. And we've started the project, and we're well into that now. So we're going to start with Lachlan as our first speaker. What I do usually, and let me explain, is I usually ask a few questions and then open it up. And I do that with everyone. It doesn't have to be me, by the way, who asks the questions. If in any future webinar forums we have other people want to do the questioning rather than me, I would really welcome that. And I know Angela Michael has agreed to do that in the future, and I'm sure there'll be others who would like to do that as well. Trevor, you would be great at it. Okay, so let's start with Lachlan. I mean, really pleased to have you here, Lachlan. This is second meeting in almost a couple of days. Can I ask all of you, by the way, to mute your microphones if you come on before we start? Lachlan, yeah. Lachlan is, as I say, from University College London, and he's done a great deal in helping us develop working with schools. So we're going to talk to him about what we've done and how we've developed it. So Lachlan, if you'd like to come on. If I can ask you first of all, I said we're working with schools, but lots of people may not know quite what we're doing. So could you tell us a bit, very briefly, because we've only got a 10-minute slot for the whole thing, what that means in developing climate action plans? What is it we're doing? What is it that you are doing?
Thanks, Francis. Good to see you again and to see a few familiar faces on the call as well. So yeah, I'm Lachlan. I am the London Regional Hub Manager for the Climate Ambassadors Programme, and I'm based at the UCL Climate Action Unit. So I presented on one of these calls several months ago and have been working particularly with Francis and Trevor on connecting with schools in the borough. And what we mean when we say support schools with climate action through this Climate Ambassadors Programme is to help schools develop a climate action plan. That's something that the Department for Education set out as one of their priorities in their sustainability and climate change strategy a few years ago. And they set out the expectation in that strategy that every school in England would have a climate action plan and sustainability lead in place by 2025. So we are working to help schools develop those plans by connecting them with volunteer support. And just one more word on that initial question, Francis, is that's why it's been so great to connect with the Climate Action Forum in Enfield, because we're looking for quite specific volunteers and quite a specific support role for schools, because we know that what schools need can be quite specific. It's a very demanding context. Schools have so much on their plate already. So when we connect volunteers with schools, we really are conscious of making the most of the school's time, that kind of precious time that they're giving to these climate action plans. So the main thing that we emphasize to the volunteers when they're supporting schools is think about co-benefits. Think about how this climate action plan can benefit the school not only for sustainability reasons, which are really important, but kind of the existing priorities that the school has already, because that's often an effective way to embed climate actions within a school context, is to say it's not just important for people who really are passionate about the climate crisis, which of course I'm sure all of us on this call are, but also for people who, the most important thing is students' well-being or the academic attainment of the students, trying to
Right.
frame actions as things that can contribute to that.
So we're working with four schools, aren't we, Linfield, to start with? Can you just tell us again briefly, because we've only, as I say, got 10 minutes to get through all this, briefly, what the progress on that is?
Yeah, so we've connected with four schools for the pilot. I have met with all of the senior leadership in the schools. I met with three of the head teachers, and then for one of the schools, I met with a couple of the heads of department, and I think an assistant head was in that meeting. So I met with them kind of between August and September. We had an initial meeting for me to understand what they're doing already, because that's also a really important step to understand what they're doing already, and then to identify what they would like help with most. So, what are their priorities? And then how we can support them kind of on an ongoing basis for a couple of months through a six-step process that we've developed. So, breaking that climate action plan writing process down into a few more manageable over the next couple of months.
I mean, obviously, schools are very busy and they can't do everything. And sometimes it seems like we're asking them to do too much. So the idea of having climate ambassadors, volunteers to go in and help is pretty important, isn't it? And you found some volunteers and through EnCap. We found some volunteers. Some haven't materialized, some, most of them have. And you've done some training. So tell us about the training and then what those volunteers will be doing themselves.
Sure. So the training we run, it is based on the insights from the UCL Climate Action Unit. So kind of research-based insights on what is a reliable way to get people to act, to take climate action. And the main focus of those insights is looking at encouraging actions rather than focusing on awareness. So really looking for opportunities to help people to act their own sense of agency, rather than um, giving people lots of statistics about how urgent the situation is. So that training focused on how volunteers can apply that in a school context, making them aware of the things that I've mentioned already, that they'll be going into a really kind of complex ecosystem in a school. It's not just about kind of engaging the teachers and the students, that is important, but it's also about engaging the whole school community and really emphasizing that a whole school approach is important to embed meaningful action in a school. Yeah, so that's what we covered in 1.5 hours. That's the headline.
So those now will be going into schools. They've been making contact with the key person in the school and the head, and they would work with them on how they develop this. Now, clearly, if we extend this beyond the four schools that we hope to do in the future, you need more volunteers, don't you? That's pretty important. How important is it that we find volunteers before we move on?
Yeah, I would say it's extremely important. I think the way that this model works, or the Climate Ambassador program works, as I said, was connecting schools with high quality volunteer support and volunteers who are kind of prepared for this role. So the rule of thumb that we try to stick to is for any school that we offer support to, we have a volunteer lined up already, so that we're not kind of over promising to the school, and we're kind of setting the expectations, because yeah, we don't want to be saying to a school, we'll be able to provide you with support if we don't have the kind of the volunteer capacity to match that.
Well, that means if anyone here is interested in volunteering and would like to do some work with Lachlan and with us in going into schools in the future, let me know. When I say with us, we've developed a partnership. When Lachlan contacted us, I got together several groups, Lachlan himself, obviously, and EnCaf. Trevor, who's going to speak in a minute, from Edmonton Community Partnership, and they were critical in this. We also involved, obviously, our air pollution group in EnCaf. We involved Local Motion, who is interested in the impact on children and pupils and students in the school. And we involved Power Up North London because they're interested in decarbonisation. They're interested in actually developing community energy solar panels and so on in schools. When you develop a project like this, Lachlan, how important is it that you develop a partnership like this?
Yeah, extremely important. And I see Aurora's on the call who's kind of looking at that the air pollution work with EnCaf. Um, and I think what's great about this approach and what really excited us about working with EnCaf and working in the Enfield in the borough of Enfield was we're very aware that we don't want to be coming in as if nothing is happening already. We're acutely aware that there are many great projects and really important actions happening all across London. And our role is in promoting this climate action plan document and trying to get schools to write it is to capture existing actions that are happening. And I think that's something that's illustrated really well through EnCaf is you have the air pollution initiative, which is great. And that can then be something that schools do. And then they record that and capture that as an action on their climate action plan. So I think that structure is what works best for schools as well, because we often find that the issue isn't so much that there's a bunch of actions they can take, it's that they feel quite overwhelmed. If they start Googling, what can a school do? They'll be maybe overwhelmed with all of the different things out there. So being able to tap into these existing initiatives in Enfield and through EnCaf is extremely helpful for schools because when I've met with the head teachers, I've been able to say, this is the climate action plan. There are 4 areas you should cover, and through Power, um, you can look at the one of these pillars that will give you lots of actions to put in one of these pillars, and through the air pollution monitoring project, that's another set of actions that you can put onto your climate action plan.
And obviously, we're trying to incorporate community energy and air pollution into that, and that fits in very much with the spec you've got in working with the schools. I mean, for example, the air pollution um, part of our project, and you're going to talk to Aurora about that. How would you go about incorporating that in what you do?
So that I can give an example, or I can even just say what I've said to the schools so far, which is um, a climate action plan, as I said, it's about engaging the whole school community. And that will include students, but it will also include teaching staff, non-teaching staff, such as school business managers or site managers. And a project or doing a project like looking at air pollution or a kind of citizen science project ticks all of those boxes. So with one kind of uh, focus area, you can engage multiple different parts of the school community in ways that play to their strengths. So with students, that will be fantastic at getting them interested in engaging with the science or empowering students to feel like they're doing something meaningful. With the more operational sides of of the school community, they will be the ones who are in a position to potentially do something about that. So it's giving them an opportunity to act based on data and information. And then for the teaching staff, it's potentially a really good teaching resource. So being able to incorporate data that students have collected themselves into lessons in the school, again, that kind of really lines up nicely with the academic aims that a school will have.
Okay, so you sort of answered my last question about the importance of empowering students, and that's really good. So let's open it up to people here now and see if they have any questions or and comments on what we're all doing together. So, is there anyone here who would like to ask a question or make a comment? There was a big pause when
Yes,
we
I would
started
like to
doing
ask.
this.
I would like to ask a question.
Yeah, David, hi.
Is your hi, long time no see? We what exactly is this? You know, the schedule. What exactly is the curriculum that you're trying to teach these children? And presumably what you're trying to do is influence them so that when presumably they become adults, they might be able to affect some change. What you were trying to achieve by teaching children that the air is not fit to breathe, the water's not fit to drink, and the food's not fit to eat. Where do we go from there?
Okay.
That's
Lachlan?
sorry, Francis. Yeah, that's a great question. And without putting Aurora on the spot, you might have some answers as well, Aurora, with that project. But I would say, from our perspective, we do appreciate that climate anxiety is a major issue, and what we don't want to be doing is increasing that within the schools that we go into, which is why we really emphasize in all of our work as the climate action unit, but especially in this schools-based project, agency and opportunities for acting. So we would not, for example, go into a school and say, you should tell your students that the air is polluted and that the water isn't safe for drinking. We wouldn't frame it in that way. It would more be, let's look at opportunities that students can have to do something about levels of air pollution. So that's kind of a rule of thumb that we use is only give some information, especially kind of concerning information to young people if there is something concrete and kind of disproportionately significant that they can do so they feel like they're doing something. That would be my answer as a non kind of specialist on, air pollution or anything like that.
So, what worries me
Hold on,
is that sorry.
Yeah, go on, David.
No, I'm just going to say what worries me is what sort of lead time you're talking about. How long do you think you've got before you change something? I've been observing this for 20, 30 years. I heard many, again, you pick up information. I remember reading, might be 40 years ago, that when you concrete over land, you increase the temperature. I remember I was in New York in 1978, shows how old I am. At 1 o'clock in the morning, it was about 89 degrees. 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, we've been destroying the land for centuries, and now suddenly we're going to do something about it. I don't know what sort of period of time you have in mind to correct this.
Well, let Lachlan answer that because we've got three other people who also want to ask questions. So, Lachlan, do you want to reply on that briefly?
Just very quickly to say, it is really concerning, and I think a challenge is how do you communicate that urgency without causing panic again, especially with young people. I would just say that something that we actually cover in the training for climate ambassadors is one of the insights is that fear won't do it. Fear is not a reliable, and there's good kind of grounding in psychology and neuroscience research on this. Fear isn't a reliable indicator of when people will act. Fear only works in certain conditions that don't really apply neatly to a problem like climate change. So again, I would just reiterate that when we're trying to get schools to act with all the constraints that they have, it's about giving them concrete, meaningful opportunities for action instead of saying, if you don't do something by this time, then there'll be terrible consequences because ultimately we just want them to act. That's kind of what we have to focus on.
I think isn't that being a bit?
David, sorry, I'm going to
Okay.
I'm going to ask other people because I've got to get them as well. I mean, we've got a short amount of time. Asani, you've got your hand up.
Hello, good
Yeah,
evening. My
can
name
you?
is Asani from. Hello.
Yes, can you ask quickly your question, please?
Question is to Lauren. I want to ask him the level of incorporation of the three, centers of sustainability and the three domains of education. Has he taught, those schools to incorporate the three domains of education and the three, centers of sustainability, that is anthropocentrism, technocentrism, and ecocentrism. So how has he incorporated the three domains of education and the three centers of sustainability? Then, secondly, very quickly.
Okay, let's take that first. Let's take that first, Asani, because I've got other people as well asking questions. How do you incorporate those in? This really brings in your four pillars, doesn't it, Lachlan?
Okay.
Yeah, I would say the short answer is we don't incorporate those explicitly. The pillars from the Department for Education's um, strategy are decarbonization, adaptation, resilience, biodiversity, and climate education. So there are kind of points of reference.
Okay, and Aurora, you have your hand up. Aurora,
So, just from the point of view of air pollution, I think, but also generally the whole program is giving out a very positive message, and the message that it's possible to do things. It's possible to do things um, on a national level, on a local level, and on an individual level. And just talking about air pollution, well, I know that there are still a lot of problems about air pollution. There's a lot of concern, but at the same time, we have to take a little bit of a long view in terms of where we've come from 1952, when 8,000 people died in the big smog in London. And nowadays we are very, very far away from that. There's been legislation and a series of legislation, and there's a lot of effort to reduce air pollution. And the students can learn about this, and they can also, by measuring, they might have some surprises to see that air pollution in their area is not as bad as you might expect it to be. So there are positive things to take from this, not just that it's all terribly bad. We are making progress, perhaps not as fast as we should, but there is progress, and by educating children and getting them involved, we can make even faster progress, because that's the generation that will have to deal with very tough things.
Aurora,
So,
by the
yeah.
way, is the person who's leading on our air pollution work in EnCaf, and she's done a tremendous amount of work on it. Cedric, you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, thanks, Francis. Yeah, I was wondering particularly what kind of concrete actions were included under decarbonisation, and also whether, yeah, some of it might be practical, some of it might be about having campaigning or having conversations with parents, whether that's a way of getting people, immediate. It's sort of like a more immediate action than this idea that it's just awareness raising for when you're older and you're going to be anxious in between. Thanks.
Okay, I mean, maybe you could take that up, Lachlan. I mean, you're talking about what actions we're taking, the decarbonisation. We did some really positive work yesterday, didn't we, with Power Up North London about solar panels on roofs. Do you want to mention that as an example of how we can take this forward?
Absolutely, yeah. So one example is through the partnership, Power Up North London have offered to do feasibility, or I think pre-feasibility studies for any of those four schools who are interested. Actually, one Edmonton County School already has solar panels. So the other three schools who are, and they all said they were interested. So Power Up North London is going to look into doing those pre-feasibility studies for solar panels and kind of take things from there. They have good contacts with London Diocese, and two of the schools on the pilot are diocese schools. So that sounds positive as an initial step. Just quickly to say, in addition to those infrastructure kind of actions, there's also behavioral actions. So looking at doing things like auditing how people are getting to and from the schools. It can also be looking at food waste. That also falls under decarbonisation. So there's a variety of things that are covered.
Okay, and Anthony, you got your hand up as well.
So, if just going back to the fear factor, because if the media and our leaders, the governments, are pumping out fear 24/7, that, for example, they're showing that the end of a matter is worse than the beginning of it. When the truth is the end of a matter is better than the truth is that the end of a matter is better than the beginning if you have the right mindset and you feed the people the right information. Because I was watching the news just yesterday and now, early this yesterday morning, and they're going to impose tax on packaging, that they're going to tax the people who manufacture, which then the manufacturers are going to then put it back onto the people who buy the food, which means that the price goes up again.
Okay,
So it's a vicious.
yeah, let Lachlan take that because I know he has to go at 7:30.
Yeah.
Lachlan, I mean, there's this whole question of, going towards net zero quickly will cost people. And how do we, in the work you're doing, in the work we're doing with schools and so on, address that particular problem?
Yeah, so two responses come to mind with that. Firstly, I think the media is an interesting point. The example in our team is it it is fantastic that, for example, The Guardian has a climate crisis section. It's great that they are giving it that prominence, but also if the only news is crises and negative framing as opposed to, say, climate action oriented news as well, um, you know, uh, are we skewing towards just doom and gloom and not those examples of concrete action and what can be done? That's one thing. And then secondly, yeah, just to say in terms of costs of net zero and fears around net zero, I'm not an expert, as I say, a technical expert in that. I would just say that again, thinking about the school context and thinking about action and young people's future. I don't think I think there's certainly enough evidence to say that green careers, for example, or the green energy transition is happening as we speak. And if you think about it from, a 10-year-old's perspective in this country or a 16-year-old's perspective, educators have a responsibility to prepare them for that future and that workplace. Again, even if you are concerned or passionate about climate change, but you just care about, people's job security in the future. So that's just one point to make on that.
Okay, we've really got to finish, but David, you've got to have that. If you can make your point very, very briefly, we'll try and deal with that.
Are you talking to me? Oh, did I have my hand up? I didn't realise.
Oh,
No,
it's a legacy hand. All right, it's a
okay.
legacy hand.
No,
Don't worry.
it's just that you see, I look at it from a different perspective. I've been living out of the country for over 30 years. I lived in Enfield. I went to Dame Hutton's Grammar School, and it was Angel Islington when I went there. And I recall growing up, there was a significant event happened every few years. You're about the same age as I am, and if you recall, there was Cyprus, there was Indonesia, there was a Korean War, which I do nothing about, and it happened every 3 years. Today, it's happening every single day. So Lachlan mentioned something about fear. The world is either run by fear or love. It's absolutely clear for anybody that the world is run by fear. And the fact of the matter is, I'll just finish on this. If you go to school and they don't teach you morality, what's the point? If they teach you to just to learn academics, so you can go and become like a lot of my friends did, lawyers and doctors and dentists, that's not creating society. The reason we're in such a trouble is because nobody really cares. There is no cohesion within your society at all. And therefore, the fact that you have to do this is evidence of your failure as a society.
Okay, David. In fact, yeah, let's leave it at that because that's a good message to begin with as well. Anyhow, so I know, Lachlan, you have to go now at 7:30. So thank you very much for joining us today. We've got Trevor coming on. Who's part of the partnership, so we can still carry on with questions after we've talked to Trevor. So thank you, Lachlan, and it's great to work with you and to do the things that we're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Francis. Take care, everyone.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Okay, we have Trevor with us as well. Trevor Blackman is from the Edmonton Community Partnership, and he's been sort of indispensable in helping us develop this because he's, helped us to make contact with schools and And like EnCaf, he's been a really great networker in getting this together. So, Trevor, if I could start asking you a few questions and then bring other people in again, and I'm sure, those of you who want to ask questions, there'll be time to do that with Trevor. So, Trevor, you're involved in this. Why did you decide you thought you would like to get involved in this project?
Our schools needed it really. I mean, Lachlan's talked really well and passionately about the need for schools to have their climate action plans. You say by the end of the year, but it originally was September. But for me personally, it was also because listening to some of our head teachers was around the whole kind of justice climate emergency. So that's around fuel poverty, energy poverty. Schools have decimation of budgets. They're walking around turning off lights to save energy. And with those depleted budgets, the real emergency for a lot of our schools is, how are they paying their fuel bills, their energy bills? And that also connects to some of our parents as well, real crisis of energy poverty in our homes and children coming into our schools. I can talk about, food poverty as well, but they're coming in cold during the winter. These things over the last 12 months have been something that have been real and present. So I wanted to look at how we could support some of our schools, particularly around saving energy, moving into a more of a greener space as well. And when you contacted me, Francis, to tell me about this, I was like, yeah, this can make sense. But it won't make sense for all of our schools because they don't have the resources to put in to make some of the changes when we talk about the climate action plan. So what you presented and Lachlan presented was a way with the ambassadors to support the aim of getting these plans done. But then with locomotion as well, the educational side of the air pollution stuff with Aurora looking at key stage 2. My mind then went to, we could do some real creative stuff maybe later on down the line where we really involve some of the school community around climate, but using art. So my head was like, we could do a bid to the Water for All or there's the Alan Lane Foundation. So I'm ahead of myself. That's how I work. But the main thing was around our schools really experiencing and are experiencing issues around funding and energy and how long-term we address that. So the solar powers are key as well. So that's a long answer to your question, but that's why.
It's
That's
good.
why.
It also shows you, like me, you like to organize, you like to create organization out of chaos, but you like to start with chaos. It's great to have that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we started we started with 4 schools and you helped choose those 4 schools for us. Why did you choose those 4 schools? What made them particular?
Well, the first one, as Lachlan said, was Ed County because the head teacher, Paul Miller, who had already started this journey and had put the end result was the solar panels on the roof and could speak really eloquently about the power of this and in real terms how much money that saved. So having him as a champion of a spear carrier saying this is why it was important, so he could pass on that experience and that knowledge to other schools and the other schools because of the area. So if I look at St. John, St. James, that when I think of that school and Fore Street and all the things that come back to me are stuff to do in Lewisham 2013, Ella Casella and all of that, and kids going to school with respiratory problems, that is real in Fore Street. So my conversations with the head teacher there were around the issues she was experiencing around health, and again, going back to how she wanted to save energy. And then the 2 other schools are Latimer All Saints School and Hounsfield School, who both, when you presented, Francis, way back when, about the possibilities of doing this, and particularly around energy and solar power, raised their hands from day one and said, I really want to get involved. But at the time, we didn't have the capacity to take it forward. So when you eventually approached me again, they were first to put up their hands. So they're in my head. So that's really why, because these are schools who, alongside the Ivy Trust, who have really taken this beyond, and actually now all of their schools, so this is Churchill School, for instance, have all of their climate action plans. So yeah, it was just something that these schools, particularly the 2 Church of England schools, don't have the finances, and Hounsfield was just like Rob just wanted to do it. So that's why it's about senior leadership who want to make a difference. And these schools, all the head teachers and senior leadership said, please put us in contact with Aurora, put us in contact with Vera, put us in contact with Tanjua, I can't remember, from the solar power. Just, yeah, we want to do it.
And it's worth mentioning, I didn't, and I'm sorry I didn't mention it, that Vera Beja is also involved, and she's the MPO Climate Change Officer.
Yeah.
She's very keen in working with us. Now, we're hoping to expand this, aren't we, Trevor?
Yeah.
And there is a meeting on Thursday, which we're going to be talking to other heads as well. So how do you think we can move that forward?
Well, it's important to have particularly you in the room and all those heads to speak of what we've done so far. You know, and like again, I must emphasize that we've got Paul Everett from Locomotion, who's part funded these pollution machines, which are going to fall part of this year two curriculum for our primary schools. So I just think it's important that those heads and senior leaders are in the room, particularly Paul Miller and you, to talk about what we're doing and for us to monitor that over the coming months to see if we can support other schools to get involved. The biggest thing is the ambassadors, you know, and if they can start having conversations with key members, even parents in their schools about this, to say, would you be interested? And then we can have some of those ambassadors go down to those schools and share their insights. And maybe, just maybe, we might, out of this, just get another 3 ambassadors. To me, it may seem small, but that's big. If we just get 3. And I do want to look at particularly around how we expand, to David's point, you know, beyond the scaremonger and stuff. How do we ensure this is cascaded across the school? And I think it can be cascaded in different ways, particularly within the curriculum, as enrichment and extracurriculum activities. So it's about, for me, how can we get maybe artists or outside agencies who have either got funding or need funding to frame some of their work around climate and climate action, etc., in an interesting way that really ignites young people's imagination and their awareness. Again, to David's point, you know, because and to Aurora's point, they are the future. But if we start earlier on with them, hopefully they can implement a lot of these things as they move through the primary school. And that's the key thing. Paul Miller oversees Ed County, was very connected to Ed County Primary, even though he's a secondary. So it's about how we start early with these kids to really build that knowledge, and it becomes part of their DNA, I hope, in the future. So that's why it's important. And whether I'm here or not, the important thing is that those schools grasp that, and we support from Edmund, particularly Edmonton Community Partnership, particularly around the fundraising, to make it interesting for kids to learn and to do something as civic ambassadors. Because, you know, no matter how old you are part of your community, and you should have a footprint in how that community develops and addressing some of those key issues. That's how I see things anyway.
Okay, no, that's great. Thanks, Troy. Let's open it up and see if anyone would like to ask a question or a point. Cedric, you've got your hand up again. Oh, no, that was a thumbs up, wasn't it? That was a thumbs up. Anybody have a question at all on that? I think you've silenced everyone, Trevor. I mean, just to repeat, you know, the volunteers are very, very important. To get climate ambassadors are very, very important. And, you know, if anybody would like to volunteer in that, that would be great. Okay, Asani, you have your hand up. Can you ask a brief question, because we don't have too much time?
Okay, then. My question to Trevor is that in their advocacy visit to school, have they, you know, explained to the students that the world generally have exceeded, you know, 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries, you know, in order to accentuate or, you know, to encapsulate the climate, you know, the emergency involved in the climate crisis, that the world has exceeded, you know, 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries, and, you know, we're inching towards the tipping point. They explain to the student like that, to, you know, to have this sense of, you know, emergency about it. So that's something to Trevor.
Trevor, did you pick that
Hello?
up? Trevor?
No, sorry, I didn't get a question. Sorry.
So what was your actual question, Asani? Can you put it in a very brief question? And
Okay.
Can everyone mute their microphone if they're not speaking, please? Asani?
Okay. My My question is that have they explained to the students that the world has exceeded 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries? That is my question to them, in order to engender that sense of emergency in them and to
Okay, I got
attach some.
it. Yeah, I got that. At the planetary boundaries, I mean, this is sort of Kate Raworth donut economic stuff, Trevor. How do we sort of get that over? I think explaining the boundaries that we're going through that are not sustainable.
I don't have the answer to that. That's why we have the experts in the room. But I hope, alongside Lachlan and everyone else, that work is being done. I don't know. I don't know how we do it in our schools, but I know this to be true, which is why I say it has to be in different ways. It's not sit down and chalk and talk. It's getting them engaged and getting them engaged locally, and looking at how they can make those changes and awareness. But I don't know the full extent, so I can't give you a full answer on that.
Well, I'm sure we'll be going through that again in the future. But
Yeah.
Angela, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick one. Just interested in how other parts of the borough, other schools could be kind of put forward for it.
You're asking how they could.
Yeah, because obviously it
Yeah.
sounds like an excellent program in partnership with Edmonton Community Partnership. But I mean, I don't know how many schools there are in Enfield.
So do you want to respond to that, Trevor?
Yeah, no, I will. Good question. For the partnership only houses 21 schools, and they're predominantly within the corridor of Ponders End and Edmonton. So Edmonton Green, Lower Edmonton, Upper Edmonton, moves into Halsbury Ward as well, slightly into Winchmore. So it depends where, for our partnership, the schools are, but we're not across the A10. So it really is, I don't know. That's something really for EnCaf to talk about. I can only speak for our
I mean, we
school.
will be talking about that because we're going to work with Vera, who's the Enfield Climate Change Officer, and she has a sort of schools network, and she's really interested in what we're doing. So she's invited us to that meeting, and she's wanting a meeting with myself and Trevor to discuss how we can take it forward across Enfield and not just in the east. So we're beginning to do that, but we have to do it step by step, because if we don't have the volunteers, we can't really do it. So we have, the volunteers are really, really important. Joe, you want a question?
You mentioned them just then again. What do you mean by volunteers, and what are you asking?
You can't answer. Can you answer that, Trevor, or do you want me to? I mean, I can't give you the details. That's a question really to Lachlan, who was on earlier, because he's the one dealing with the volunteers. What he does is he gets the volunteers in and goes through with them a 6-stage process that they work with schools. Like, for example, stage 1, what are you doing already? Stage 2, what can you do in the future? Stage 3, how do you do it? And so on. And he goes through all of those, and he looks at a climate plan then, which has 4 pillars. One is biodiversity, which involves air pollution and a lot more. Second one is decarbonisation, which includes community energy and a lot more. The third one that they add to the climate plan is adaptation and resilience. And finally, they look at how they can involve the parents, the community, and go beyond the school. So what the volunteers do is they go in and help develop that plan with the school, and they come back, I guess, and come with us and see how we can help as well in doing that. So it's a new scheme. They aren't necessarily going to be experts, but they're there as facilitators, really. So and they go through the training, and then they will work with Lachlan and with the schools to take it forward. Is that something you'd be interested in? Is that why you're asking the question, Joe?
Can I just add to that for Joe as well?
Yeah.
So there is a template for anyone who's willing or interested, and how I would see it, based on, for instance, conversations with Patsy St. James and St. John's, is you will have a series of meetings, probably 4 to 5 meetings, and at each meeting you take one of those chunks, one of those pillars. You're talking to senior leadership or the head teacher, and then you're filling that in. Then you'll go away, arrange another date to come back at look at the next one. You'll ask those questions, you'll fill it in, you'll go away. And I think if you see it over a series of maybe 4 to 6 meetings, which are an hour or an hour and a half, you're helping to complete the school's plan, and then you take that away and just kind of write that up for the school. But it is, I would say it's like R&D. You're doing that research, that development, and you're writing it up, but you would break it up. You won't try and do everything in one sitting because it won't help. So, and as a volunteer, you've only got so much time. I think
That
Lachlan might agree with that, but that's how I
I,
saw it. Right?
yeah, no, I think that's very good to explain that. Does that help you, Joe, in that? Okay, if you are interested, I won't pressure you, but if you are interested, let me know because it'd be good to have you involved. Okay, everyone. So we come to the end of that now in our session. Thank you, Trevor, for doing that, and thank you for all the help you've given in developing this. It's been really, really great to do that. Okay, so thank you. And so that is sort of the end of the school bit of this. And I hope you found it interesting because it is really an exciting project for us because I didn't think we'd get the schools on board as quickly and as enthusiastically as we have. And it's really, really encouraging that we've done that. Okay, we're going to another project now with Hallie Healy. Hallie is from the University of Birmingham, and she came to us to develop a project which looks at, in a way, I suppose it's climate justice. What we're looking at is how we, particularly in the east of the borough, look at how climate change impacts on the most vulnerable people and what has got to be done specifically in those areas in order to adapt to what's going to happen because of climate change. And she's put in a bid jointly with us to get some funding to be able to develop that. And what I'm going to do now is talk to Ali and talk about the project so that you can understand it more and we can all understand it more. So, Hallie, thanks for joining us. And we've got a 10 minutes section on this as well. Tell us then, you've put this project in with us about adaptation taking place in specific localities because different localities will have different problems. Some will have overcrowding in heat islands, some will have flooding, and so on and so on. How important is it that we look at specific localities, place-based approach, in other words? How important is that in addressing climate change?
Well, thanks for inviting me, Francis, first of all, and what an amazing group. It's so nice to be here. It's really important is the short answer. So I'm a research fellow at the University of Birmingham, like Francis said, working on a project called WM Adapt, which means West Midlands Adapt.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt. I can't hear you. Can you speak up?
Yeah, it is a bit low, Harley. If you could get closer to the microphone.
Sure. Okay. I've never had this.
That's better.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So yeah, it's quite important. I came to EnCaf with this proposal based on work that we're doing in Birmingham in the West Midlands on a project called WM Adapt, which stands for West Midlands Adapt. But I'm a resident in Enfield, so I wanted to see if I could bring what we're doing in the West Midlands area home, if you will. And our departure point is that there's a significant amount of evidence, including from the recent independent report called Progress in Adapting to Climate Change, published this year by the Climate Change Committee, that says UK cities are not climate ready and that people who are already feeling the worst effects are in fact the worst off. So in other words, the people who are most vulnerable to things like extreme heat and extreme cold and heavy rain and storms and damp are also the most vulnerable. So those who are living in poverty, the elderly, especially elderly people living on their own, homeless people, children, people with chronic health issues, pregnant and menopausal women. And so far, despite a lot of talk and investment, things don't seem to be getting any better, in my view, because approaches are very generic and top-down. They're oriented towards generating profit or growth. So focusing on technology-centered approaches or programs like net zero that can tend to be one size fits all aren't really working. And we're arguing that any effective adaptation has to be place-based. And that means aware of the full range of vulnerabilities faced by residents and how these different vulnerabilities overlap and compound and intersect with each other, but how they also play out in the wider context of specific neighborhoods, bearing in mind their physical characteristics and their resource constraints.
Okay. What we're trying to do, aren't we, is go into 3 particular wards and try and find what their specific issues are. And we're trying to create a dialogue with people in those wards using what is called a World Cafe approach. And that's something Locomotion is very interested in because they want to do that nationally. Can you explain to people what we mean by a World Cafe approach?
Sure, I'll explain and I'll try to give examples too. So World Cafe is a globally tried and tested participatory method that's been taken up in the research community as well. In academia, I wouldn't say it's an academic tool, it's more of a deliberatory tool. But it works really well in doing research with and for communities. And it takes place in an informal cafe-like setting where discussion is facilitated around specifically framed topics. And the ethos is one of respectful sharing and listening, sometimes storytelling. So bringing people together to get to know each other and their experiences and their views, and also to try and understand where those views come from. And there are different ways of doing World Cafes. So you can have kind of static conversation where you would ideally be working with a group that is no bigger than 20 or 25 people, although I've seen it done in much larger groups. I don't know that it works that well in larger groups, but you would have maybe 25 people divided into smaller groups of 4 or 5. And they might be given a question. For example, in WM Adapt, the first question is to ask people to share their experience of extreme weather and how it's impacted them on a personal level, as well as across their neighborhood. And so there'll be discussions for a set period of time, like not too long, especially for this question, talking about experiences with extreme weather. Has to be framed carefully again, because we're trying to avoid the whole sort of stoking of anxiety and triggering people. But the idea is to identify the challenges that people are facing on a daily basis, and then feeding that back to the whole room. But then you can also have more dynamic settings where people will have a topic per table and will move around the room, visiting different tables and sharing and explaining their views and feeding those back to the room.
And the outcome of this is obviously some academic research that University of Birmingham is very interested in. But from our point of view, also the development of a how-to manual so that we can take it to other areas to see how they can look at their needs. Could you explain how you think we could do that?
Yeah, so we're in the process of converting the methods that we have designed in Birmingham into a kind of manual or handbook for community engagement, so that people can have these discussions in their own neighborhoods, being a place-based project. And so this resource is being co-produced. So we're learning as we go. From our own reflections as engaged scholars, but also with the community researchers that we recruit and train, that we work with to co-facilitate, and also learning from the feedback from the participants themselves. And I think this is really important because SDG 11 is laudable in some ways, the way it calls for making cities more inclusive and safe and resilient and sustainable. But apart from that, as a goal, it's really quite hollow, and it's underpinned by a lot of assumptions about how to achieve this. And for us, climate adaptation isn't really just a technical or a financial issue. It's actually about justice and human rights and inclusivity. So yeah, that's how we're designing this manual.
We have another project we're talking about. We don't know whether we'll get the funding for any of this, by the way. We hope we will. But we have another project, don't we, that's attached to this in a way. It's a subsidiary to this, where we hope as a result of working with another ward and the work we've done on this project, we can develop what's called a vulnerability index to find out who are the most vulnerable in the area and who will be affected by extreme weather, like heat excess, for example. Paris has got that after they had the huge crisis in 2003. We don't have that as systematically as they do. And is that your hope that we can develop that sort of vulnerability index?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the proposal is developing something called a climate risk and vulnerability assessment at ward level. For the most deprived or underserved wards of Enfield. And you can see an example of this if you go to the West Midlands Combined Authority website. But this combines different layers of data already in the public realm on different types of vulnerability, including climatic, so risk of heat island effect, river and surface flooding, environmental data like risk from lack of tree canopy cover and open green space, but also combined socioeconomic vulnerability, so data on poverty, unemployment, education level, linguistic isolation, elderly people living alone, and percent of income spent on housing. And it's similar. It would probably come out looking like the index of multiple deprivation. You'd get a color-coded ranking that shows where the greatest vulnerabilities are. I'm not sure how possible it is to produce a more granular picture at ward level, but it's certainly something we can explore. And the value in doing this is, of course, so that authorities can see where the biggest problems are and where money needs to go. But the real value of the CRVA is in combining it, I think, with the Will Cafe data to show what residents' priorities are, especially the most vulnerable.
And you say to show, and that's why I think you want to make sure we can involve the statutory authorities. Like we are in the school project, we have the climate change officer in Enfield involved. You're hoping that in this project we can get the statutory authorities, health, local authority, and so on involved. And you have this idea that we might do something like a town hall meeting and maybe develop a permanent local resilience forum that continuously looks at these problems. Is that one of your aims?
Absolutely. So to bring the local authorities together with the science and show them what we found and have a really constructive dialogue that isn't about blaming or finger pointing, but just dealing with the crisis at hand in ways that are realistic in terms of available resources, but also allows for creativity based on institutional innovations, coordinating better what's already out there, not focusing on technological innovation so much, but maybe new ways of governing adaptation, again, more based on community needs.
Okay. Right, well, let's open it up and see if anyone has any questions here on this. Does anybody want to ask a question?
I can't find the hand signal. I don't know how to do it. So can I just butt in? I hate doing this.
Is that David?
It is, yes.
Yeah, let Asani come in first because he has his hand up, all right? Asani?
Okay, my question to Ali. Hello?
Yeah,
Hello.
go ahead, please.
All right. My question to Ali is that, you're talking about climate justice and the rest, and, Africa, because I live in Nigeria, which is in Africa. So Africa is one of possibly the most impacted country because statistics, we've contributed only about 4% to the, global climate, to carbon emission. So, and we are facing, possibly the most vulnerable, continent of the world. So my question is, should we be looking at ecocide like that, or in terms of reparation, or should looking at ecocide because Africa should have a seat at the table. So the possibility of having a case of ecocide.
Okay,
So that's my question to Ali.
That's a big question which goes beyond our project, Ali. But do you have any views about that ecocide? That crime against the environment is a crime.
Absolutely. I'm a big advocacy of an international court against ecocide. Asani, I most recently came from the Global South. I was working at the University of Johannesburg and working on environmental justice in Gauteng and all kinds of different provinces. The interesting thing about Enfield is that we've got a bit of the south and the north in East Enfield. So I think the issue of justice and injustice is yeah, just as important, but I think a little bit different in the Enfield context. But yeah, I take your point.
Okay, so let's see, David, you wanted to come in very quickly because I've
Yeah,
got several other
It
people.
strikes me that we're missing the not the elephant in the room. The elephant takes the whole room. The doomsday clock is about. I've got a minute to go, and here we're talking about one aspect of to change something which is going to take at least a decade, I would think. You don't have a decade. The world's falling apart. In case you didn't know. By the way, I like Ali's clock. It's a shame it doesn't work.
Okay, well, let's take that as a statement because I know there are a lot of people who believe that, there's very little we can do, and other people who believe there is still room to maneuver. And I suppose we exist because we believe we've got to have hope.
The answer
But
is
I
revolution.
understand the point you're making, but let's bring the other people in as well. Cedric, you had your hand up?
I didn't. I didn't think I had my hand up, but
Oh,
I
I
did have a
thought you
kind of
did.
I did have a kind of question since I'm there, which is out of talking to people in the World Cafe and doing the sort of not quite demographic research, whatever.
Can't hear you, Cedric. Can't hear you.
Okay. Sorry. Is that any better? The yeah. So when people start talking about adaptation and their local issues with flooding and so on, does that move people into more of a global mindset? They might start thinking about Africa and they might start thinking about decarbonisation and all that kind of stuff.
You want to respond to that, Harry?
Yeah. In my experience, people are already thinking about the connections to the global south simply because people are connected to the global south, especially the residents that I'm working with in Birmingham and the West Midlands. Many of them have recently come from the global south or have very strong ties there or relatives there. So those realities are already very much in the forefront of their minds.
Anyone else who would like to ask anything at all?
Can I just
mean, it's quite interesting, what Hallie says that, when we're talking about climate justice, we often think, and I know that Sana, mentioned this, that we're talking about it on a global context, but it also matters within nation states. There are people who are vulnerable, there are people who are less vulnerable. And so, dealing with it on that basis or on that level is important as well. I think we've got time for one more point, one more question. Anyone wants to raise anything?
If
Okay,
nobody's saying,
well,
I'll say one thing.
okay, David.
I just make a point.
Yeah, go and make one more point.
Go and download the film called Network 1976 to see exactly how the world is going. And the other thing is, there's a book called Femophobia, How Women Have Become Men. The reason why the world is in such a rotten state is because they took the female out of the world. It's totally unbalanced, and that's why you've got
that takes us on to a different topic and maybe something to look at.
Everything's
No,
connected.
I do understand that, but I want to try and keep it dead on to what we're talking about at the moment.
It is.
Listen, we've come to the end of this topic, this area now. So thank you, Harry. Harry's going to come on in our next forum as well, because we're going to concentrate on climate justice. And we've got Harry talking about place-based work in more detail. And also we've got someone from the City Bridge Trust who focuses on climate change, who's going to talk about her work. And we'll probably have someone else who talks more specifically as well on what climate justice means in general terms. So we can take this up a bit further at our next meeting. Okay, well, thanks, Hallie, and we'll see you then next month when we do that. And we should be able to go into some of these issues in more detail. So thanks for that.
There's only one relevant justice. It's called moral justice. There's no moral justice in the world.
Okay, David, you've said your point. You've said it several times. We've got to move on, okay? we have been talking about, the global issue here as well as the local issue. We're lucky in the sense that we have Fika with us. I mean, Fika Taylor is from Canada, and she joined our webinar a couple of months ago, and she is very concerned about making sure that what we do locally is seen in a global context in the work she does. So, Fika, thank you for joining us. And maybe I could start by asking you, and then we'll open this up to questions as well. You do believe, don't you, very strongly that what we do locally must be seen as part of a global issue, because if we don't, we can't effectively address climate change. Is that right?
That's correct. Thank you for having me here, Francis, and thank you for having this platform, this open platform to actually share thoughts, concerns, ideas from really every corner of the world. I found that to be quite important because, again, we usually, when we talk about life, we talk about the circle of life or the cycle of life, and there's always this connectivity when we talk about life itself. Having been born in Afghanistan, having lived in a few countries around the world until I arrived to Canada a couple decades ago, has taught me quite a few important lessons. And some of those lessons are the interconnectivity between humans and our lives. Whatever this life contains, whether it's the happiness and joy or it's the disasters and everything that comes with that. So I definitely do believe that paying attention to local issues that come from climate change are extremely important, finding the root causes, looking at vulnerable people within our communities and our societies in every way. But also it's important to understand that as the first world, as we really contribute so very much to this world progress with achievements, with productivity and everything, we also contribute to the side effects of that. So climate change and all that, with the greenhouse emission, for example, which would cause a lot of natural disasters or rises of natural disasters, which in turn would have other consequences.
I mean, you say you're in Canada, but you came from Afghanistan, and a couple of months ago you mentioned that in Afghanistan, in Kabul, it might be the first city in the world to run out of water. And is that an example, for example, how the global and the local interact? Because it could, when people run out of water, when a country runs out of water, then it can cause war, it could cause conflict. So we have to see a local crisis often in its global repercussions.
Absolutely. We all human beings at one point or another, we fight over resources, and some of those very basic and important resources are water and food. And of course, when we look at very vulnerable countries such as Afghanistan, we'll see that with war having taken over the country for about 5 decades, and again, Afghanistan is not the only one. However, it is one of the most vulnerable countries in 2025. People deal with the consequences of climate change. For example, as I mentioned, the natural disasters. We hear quite often about Afghanistan flooding. We hear about earthquake. There was just a month ago, there was an earthquake in Afghanistan that took the lives of about 2,000 people, which if we put it in the first world context, it doesn't seem like a huge number, but putting that in a country that is already impoverished, there's lack of water, lack of food, lack of land to grow food and all that. Then we face a different disaster. And if we don't address those disasters, then we will face the other consequences that would follow. For example, again, fighting for life is what we all do, regardless of our background. We all want to survive, and we all want to survive well. So then we will have waves of immigration. With immigration, we will have disruptions in the host countries, as well as in the countries that people live. With that will come into place a lot of humanitarian issues, moral issues, growth in resentment with differences between people, growth in, and again, we have everywhere we go, we have merchants of ideas. So there would definitely be very fundamental consequences that we would have to address.
You sort of set your mind to look at how we can deal with this, haven't you, in your small way, like we do everything in our small way.
Right.
We're not going to be able to solve the problem totally, but we do what we
Absolutely.
can. And you've set up an organization, haven't you, called Minds and Hearts Without Borders, to promote this local global relationship. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. I founded Minds and Hearts Without Borders International about 6 years ago, and that was just the continuous of the work that I used to do, which again is based on bringing people together from all different corners of the world, because we all have different perspective when it comes to life, and we all have different views based on our geographical places, experiences with life, and all that. I find it to be quite important to actually have a better view of our world if we want to tackle the issues that we want to tackle in better ways. One of my friends here mentioned the morality of everything, and I find that bringing people together would actually bring us closer to talk about these technical issues from a human perspective. So understanding the sufferings that humans in every corner of the world go through, how much responsibility we have in creating that, and what we can do and actually make the world a better place. With that being said, that's not only humans, but we also need to consider the lives of animals, wildlife. Mostly in impoverished countries, we're losing animals, we're losing species much more than we should. And that is a disaster that I don't see being much talked about. So wars, natural disasters, and all that really affect the wildlife in many, many different ways.
Okay, so Asani, can you mute yourself, please, because you keep coming online. Okay, so is it important then for any organization doing something locally, like ourselves, for example, to always have in mind the global perspective when we're discussing what we do locally? Because without seeing the bigger picture, we may not be as effective as we really would like to be.
Absolutely. The way I see it myself personally, I believe that compassion is the smart and intelligent way of living. Because again, one of the purposes you asked about the group is to actually open the doors into seeing one another as human beings and seeing the intelligence and being compassionate towards one another. If I have a loaf of bread today, you don't, I can share that loaf of bread with you. Tomorrow you may run out of bread and you might share your loaf of bread with me, and therefore we would both win. So the whole idea is, do we want as human beings to live with cooperation, or do we want to always be on competition? We have much to lose as human species. We have much to lose if we always live with the competitive mind. So yes, absolutely, it is important for us to come together and understand each other as human beings. Every one of us is important to this life. Every area of this earth is important for the well-being of every one of us globally.
Well, that's a good message to end this little interview. Let's bring other people in and see if they have any questions to bring to you on that. Anyone who would like to ask anything? No, not yet. I mean, Fika, it's it's really good that you're here today, and
Angela raised her hand.
Oh,
Angela
Angela,
wants to say
have you got your hand up? I see your hand up. Oh, yeah, it's a very faint hand you've got
Yeah,
there
I don't know
on
why
the
it's
corner.
not
Yeah,
yellow.
but anyhow,
I don't know why it's not yellow. I haven't fixed it.
Go ahead.
I think that, thank you so much, Fika. That's such an really important message and really kind of critical thing for everyone to hear at this point in time. I've been listening to and reading a lot about it recently, and I think kind of, directly connected to what you're saying is the thing I've been thinking about, which was about nature. I think it's exactly the same point, isn't it? Like when we talk about nature, when we talk about humans, when we talk about compassion, it's so much easier for us to start thinking about actions we can take and how to change our behavior. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It was really, really useful.
Thank you as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I was going to say, well, someone's thinking if I hope you have a question, but I mean, we're a local group on a local forum. It's quite valuable, isn't it, for you to have someone from other countries on this as well, because it makes us get out of our sort of comfort zone. If you could call climate change a comfort zone, it's not, but you know what I mean. Get out of our own sort of discussions that we have and place how we think and how we behave and how we talk about climate change in a wider perspective. So having you and others on like that is really quite important.
Thank you very much, Francis. When we look at the history, throughout history, human beings and civilizations have always flourished when they open the doors into communicating with other people from around the world, learning, teaching, and really communicating many different, not only ways of life, but understanding different perspectives and all that. And therefore, this is why I'm so grateful for platforms such as what you run here. Again, it opens the door for every one of us to see that regardless of our differences, we all share this atmosphere, we all share this world, and we all have to make what is needed and what is right and what we can for our world. Sometimes some people, they fall on their knees due to natural disasters, due to wars, due to many unfortunate events in life. And for those of us who have the possibility, it's good to take responsibility for what we can and do what we can for our world. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? We were going to have Ali Hassami on here as well, talking about carbon literacy, but he had to go to another meeting and he was only going to do a 5-minute section, but he's going to come on at our next forum. So we've got another 5 minutes to spare if anybody wants to add anything at all about what we've said, Aurora.
I think Aurora.
Yeah, Aurora's got a hand up.
Okay. I'm very moved and impressed with your setting up this organization, Minds and Hearts Without Borders, and if you could let us know also how if there's a website or if we can be in ongoing touch, because I think we yes, as Francis was saying, we have so a little bit, sometimes we might forget about the global context, and the global context is that even when we are talking about the Paris Agreement, which I'm not sure what the situation with the Paris Agreement is now, but even when that was agreed and hailed as a very important and positive thing, the agreements were not so much in the favor of the global South. And for instance, in the fact that they've agreed to that the global temperatures would be okay to, so like will be okay to be up to 2 increase by 2 degrees, because that is a very, very bad thing for the global South. And I wasn't very clear about this, but recently I've been reading about it, and I know that it is something to do with how our planet is working, and how which results in a lot of the rain and humidity is being directed towards the north, whereas in the global South there's a lot of loss of rain due to the climate change. So there are things like this. So I was wondering if your website gives more information about this sort of things and how the global South is affected very, very severely, even as we speak. Yeah. So.
Do you want to respond to that, Fika? Fika's already put that in the chat, a link to her website, so you can see it there. But do you want to respond to that, Fika?
Very quickly, yes, please. I appreciate that, Aurora. We definitely cover in oral discussions, we cover many different situations in life in different countries, different nations, globally, and all that. And also one of the very important aspects of this whole climate change, which I rarely see being talked about, but again, being a person from a very impoverished country, I see it important, is the effect of climate change on the vulnerable people in the society, such as women and children. Because again, we see with the loss of income, especially in countries that are war-stricken, we have many orphans, many widows, and again, it's important to realize that what the suffering of human beings go beyond what we can hear in a 1 hour, 2 hour discussion, and it definitely can take us to much deeper places that need and require attention. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, Michelle. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Francis. Fika, I have a wonderful friend. She's called Malaka, and I met her about 30 years ago to help her learn English. She was a governess of a school in Kabul and had to flee. She now lives in the Netherlands. I only saw her a couple of weeks ago. And she works with the council 3 days a week. She's a senior person, but she still helps with orphans from Afghanistan, people just trying to find how they can cope in the Netherlands, a very rich country. And I just wondered, she's so involved, and she had such a wonderful position in society in Afghanistan. She speaks 4 languages, but she doesn't know about your organization. So how do you disseminate your information? Because there's a big diaspora of people from Afghanistan, as you're very well aware, and there will be from other crisis areas. How do you reach out to people like that so that they feel as if there is more of a global perspective, realizing the position they're in?
Hey, Fika.
Yes, thank you for that. I have been purposely trying to keep the group to a very small number. At this point, I think between the 3 groups that I run, it's about 3,000 people or so. But due to many things in my personal life, the schedule, overbearing schedule and all that, I have had to make sure I can keep it to a level that I can do my absolute best. So it is at the point that I'm now opening the group to a larger number of people, and I'll see how it goes. I do invite anyone. I was talking to Francis about this, that I do invite anyone who would like to participate, who would like to do what is good and what they can. You're definitely more than welcome to contact me through my email address that I put in the chat, and we could get connected. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. And that's a really good invitation. Well, thank you, Fika, for doing that. And I hope all of you agree that it's great to have people, not just from Enfield, but from outside Enfield in the UK and from outside the UK as well, because it gives us that different perspective, and that's very important. We've got any other business, and there are a couple of people who want to say a couple of things, I know, in the other business. Cedric, you mentioned something about a shout out for November the 27th. Do you want to tell us about that? Cedric, are you there, or are you gone to make a cup of tea? Well, let's see if he comes back. And I know, Pamela, you had something you wanted to say as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed the earlier talk about working with schools, because I would just say that I live in Haringey, and the community energy company there is working with the council at the moment on a greener schools project. So 3 schools in the borough have been chosen to get solar panels on their roofs, and also to hold outreach sessions with the pupils and the staff and parents. So I don't know if that's happening in Enfield. I guess it is somewhere. But also the other thing I wanted to say was that the London Community Energy Fund will be relaunched again for this year. So this is money that's available from the Mayor's Office for carbon reduction projects. So if you know anybody who's thinking of doing a project that would reduce carbon in a school, it could be solar panels, it could be LED lighting, it could be community outreach. Have a look on the Assembly website, and it's a fairly easy grant to apply for, so go for it.
Okay, thanks. And when we had the meeting with schools, and Tanuja Pandit was there from Power Up Northland, and she mentioned that fund, the Mayor's Fund, Pamela, and those schools were particularly interested in it. So I think she's going to work with them and try to get some sources of funding through the Mayor's office. So I think we're sort of on to that, and I hope other schools we can get involved with that as well. Is there anyone else who wants to say anything, any other business, any other comment before we finish? No? Okay, well, thank you for attending. Our next meeting, as I said, will be the end of what month are we in now? September, aren't we? The end of October. And that will be on climate justice, and I mentioned that. And then at the end of November, we're going to look at how we engage councillors and what councillors should be like in terms of engagement. I mean, should they be more closely involved with their community rather than, for example, their party? And we've got the ex-leader of Enfield Council, Doug Taylor, who's agreed to come along, and we're trying to get a couple of other people who are involved in things like citizens' clubs and citizens' assemblies and so on, which looks at a different way in which communities engage with decision makers. So that will be the November forum. So we've got a couple more coming up. And let me repeat again what I said at the beginning of the meeting. Although I'm asking the questions before we open it up, if anyone else wants to do some of the interviewing instead of me, I would really welcome that, because I think it's important that other people do it. I quite enjoy doing it, but I think other people should do that if they would like as well. And I know one person's already told me after I asked her that she would do it as well sometimes. So if you would like to do some of the questioning, please contact me and let me know, and I can talk it over with you. Because the most important thing of this is keeping everything to time. If we have so many speakers all dealing with topics, if we let each segment go over time, then we don't finish. So it's quite important to work that out. But I think we do it at the moment reasonably well. Anyhow, thank you everyone for attending, and I hope we'll see you next month. But I hope you enjoyed this forum. I think it's been interesting, and thank you to all the speakers and for those who joined in by making comments and asking questions. And I guess we'll close this meeting now. Thank you.